I replayed Mortal Shell for the first time since it released in 2020, and boy does it have potential that it can't quite execute on. There's a lot of cool ideas, but jank and limited scope leave it feeling more like a good proof of concept than a full game. And so with Mortal Shell 2 coming out later this year, I'm excited to see if they can take the concepts that make Mortal Shell cool and deliver a full experience. Let's get into what I want out of a Mortal Shell sequel. For this video, I'm breaking down Mortal Shell 1 into its good, bad, and best elements in that order. The good elements are the cool ideas that generally worked well in the first game, but need a bit more to them in Mortal Shell 2. Unsurprisingly, I want more shells in the Shell game. Shells are playable characters in the form of corpses that the protagonist can inhabit and swap between. Each shell has varying amounts of health, stamina, and resolve, as well as unique abilities and passives that can be unlocked in any order. The first game features 5 shells, and they offer some variety in playstyles. Heals on the dexterous end with high stamina and a unique dodge, while Aerodrome is tanky with high health, and others fall somewhere between these two. Overall though, the build variety is a bit lacking. I've noticed 8 distinct shells in trailers and images so far for Mortal Shell 2, and their designs seem to suggest more distinct playstyles between them. But when it comes to Mortal Shell 2, it's not just about getting more shells, but also expanding shell progression. The ability trees in the first game are fine, but you can fully unlock a shell after just a few hours. That's fine in a 15 to 20 hour game, but as I'll discuss more in the bad section, there needs to be more content in the sequel, and it looks like we're getting it. So the shell progression will need to accommodate a larger game with more content. This could be through more expansive ability trees, meta progression for the protagonist beyond the shells, some synergy or interplay between shells and their abilities, or something else entirely. Either way, character and shell progression will need to respond to a larger world. Weapons will also need to adjust to a more robust adventure. They serve as a sort of meta progression of their own in Mortal Shell 1, as any shell can wield any weapon. Each weapon is upgraded by finding unique key items in the world, as well as an item common to all weapons used to upgrade a weapon's damage. Like with shells, this progression worked for the scope of the first game, but the quantity of weapons or depth of weapon upgrades will need to adjust to a more expansive world. Or both. Both would be great. Next, let's talk about the bad in Mortal Shell 1. These are the elements that didn't quite work for me and I hope are improved in the sequel. First is the camera. Note this is distinct from the camera mode, which is awesome. When I talk about the camera, I'm talking about how it rides on the Foundling's shoulder and swivels into awkward angles during battle. And don't even get me started on how claustrophobic smaller corridors feel. Ideally, the camera is something that you're not actively thinking about, or at least not actively fighting, and I hope to see it improved in the sequel. Next is the level design, and I'm including encounter design along with it. The level design in Mortal Shell 1 is pretty basic. There are limited shortcuts to unlock and a few side paths, but the areas are ultimately pretty linear and short. It's mostly the enemy encounters that slow down quickly moving through the areas, but this is often because enemy groups are too big, but they also have super long leashes, so rushing past one group is only ensuring that you'll end up fighting twice as many enemies further down the corridor. This results in exploration into a new area being more tedious than exciting. So when it comes to Mortal Shell 2, I want to see better level and encounter design. From what we've seen so far, I can't really tell either way, but they've added a gun, so at least that'll help with groups of enemies. Mortal Shell only has 4 main bosses and a handful of mini-bosses, and they're nothing special. Imrod is a little basic with his incredibly slow attacks, Tarsus is frustrating with how evasive he is, and the pace of the fights drags with how often you're left waiting around for an AoE to finish. And then Crucix and the Unchained are okay, but not that memorable. My favorite boss fight is the enslaved Grisha, who's technically a mini-boss. That fight has a nice rhythm and array of moves that I found pretty fun to fight, even if the camera against this larger enemy was a bit of a problem. So in Mortal Shell 2, I'm hoping to see more bosses and fights that are more interesting mechanically. From the brief glimpses of the bosses that we've seen in Mortal Shell 2, I think we're getting that. At the very least, we're getting some great boss designs. I mean, look at this guy. And now for the world design of Mortal Shell 1. It's fine for what it is, but it's just too small, and there's too many tunnels. The world is non-linear, so you can tackle the areas freely in whatever order. I like this, but there's also only 4 areas. On the one hand, I respect that they didn't overscope the project. I work in a design field and it's really easy to overscope a project, but Cold Symmetry dialed in the character progression proportionally to the content or vice versa, and it feels right-sized. And stuff like the panicky fog run back after getting a gland, and the added roguelite mode of the Virtuous Cycle are concepts that work with the smaller world of the game. However, the weak character progression and kinda flat difficulty curve are due to the small, non-linear experience. There's not enough content to raise the stakes that would demand more meaningful progression. And I think it's this flatness to the difficulty and progression that make Mortal Shell 1 feel more like a demo than a full-featured title. Mortal Shell 2 is described as having a compact open world with over 60 dungeons, which doesn't really tell us too much. However, the variety in areas and number of bosses and enemies shown in the trailer make me hopeful that Mortal Shell 2 will deliver a bigger experience and the systems to support it. Before moving on to the best aspects of Mortal Shell 1, I have a category that somehow straddles being both a bad and best part of the experience, and that's combat. The combat in Mortal Shell is slow, which I think is great. Souls-likes are getting faster and adding a deflect, and that's good too, but I like Mortal Shell providing some slow Souls-like representation. And the slow and weighty combat of Mortal Shell works for me, in theory. What brings it down is it's a bit janky and attacks don't have enough feedback. The combat's a bit floaty in both dishing out and receiving damage, and more than once I found myself taking a hit and only noticing because my health bar went down. That just doesn't pair well with slower and weightier combat, and I hope the sequel improves the feel of combat. The final category is what worked best in Mortal Shell 1. These are the ideas that worked really well and I want more of it. And the first of these is hardening. It functions as a defensive verb that works best when used offensively, whether that's avoiding a big attack to set up a counter, or popping it mid-combo to quickly block a hit and keep on swinging. It also just looks cool to leap into the air and turn into a statue. And this is more about the visuals and lore, but I also like how the dodge animation is presented as briefly hardening, which is just a fun diegetic explanation for the iframes. And speaking of lore, I love familiarity in Mortal Shell. Using an item to learn more about the world is a great twist on item descriptions. You initially don't know what an item does, and the only way to learn is to use it. That obviously unsavory tar spore, eat it to learn what it does. And of course it poisons you. But maxing out familiarity by using an item more transforms the use in varying ways. In the case of the tar spore, congrats, it now makes you immune to poison for a bit. It's a fun system that encourages and rewards using items, and I'm looking forward to consuming all manner of horrible items in the sequel. Another storytelling device that works well in Mortal Shell is the dialogue you get from unlocking shell abilities. Each dialogue unlocked tells part of the shell's story, further fleshing them out as you're investing more into using them. Because you can unlock abilities in any order, their story is told out of order. The fragmented storytelling lets the player piece things together and fill in the gaps themselves. This is obviously my shit, and while the storytelling in Mortal Shell 1 doesn't always perfectly strike the balance between straightforward and open-ended, both the familiarity and shell unlock systems are a great way to slowly deliver details about the world and characters. And that's what I want from Mortal Shell 2. A bigger world with better crafted dungeons, more interesting and challenging bosses, more shells with deeper character progression and new character stories to piece together. Keep the weighty combat and hardening system, just make it a bit more responsive and add more feedback. And finally, keep making me eat weird shit and playing the loot to get good. What do you want out of Mortal Shell 2? Let me know in the comments. Please give the video a like if you enjoyed it, and for more Mortal Shell content, please subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for your support. Thank the devs for Gorf, and thanks for watching.